We're back at SFA News Live. So what happened, probably that was monumental in the supermarket world, is there was this little New Jersey chain of supermarkets called King's Supermarkets. It's still there today. But what they did is they had a focus on culinary. They really cared about the kind of foods that they were selling, and they wanted to educate people. So they brought in my friend, Joanna Pruess, and said, create a culinary school, create a cooking school. It was the first time that was ever done here in the U.S. in a supermarket. So tell us about that and how it grew and the kind of impact that it had.
I think it was really a great moment. And I begged them for 13 months to let me do this. And finally they said, do it.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate. I designed it. And it was the first handicap-safe school in the country. So that allowed me, I did classes for the blind, the deaf, the learning disabled. I did couples classes. I had groupies of men's class who came in on Friday night and made tarts with me.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting, relevant to something like cheese, where we were doing classes with Parmigiano Reggiano, and I went to the then cheese buyer, a lovely gentleman called Eddie Edelstein. I said,
I remember Eddie.
And he said to me, Joanna, we can't sell Parmigiano Reggiano. It's $9.99 a pound. I said, really? You know, it's like if you build it, they'll come.
Right. And $9.99, and that probably is mid-70s.
Mid-80s.
Mid-80s, okay.
And the thing is that in the course of the 5 years that I was the director, I had 15,000 students. I also had 30 teachers, but probably some of the greatest classes, I did a class for the blind that to this day makes my heart sing. And eventually there were either 5 or 6 other satellite classes. There were kids classes, and to this day I still have people who come up to me and say, oh, my kids took cooking classes at your school.
Oh, that's fabulous.
It is fabulous.
It's great. It's great. So let's talk a little bit about cheese. You mentioned, and in fact, I remember Eddie Edelstein really well. I used to have to call on him to sell cheese to him for my dad. And he was a tough buyer.
Yeah.
He was a tough buyer. I can still picture him. And let's talk about what you see happening in cheese today and how it's evolved.
Which is very exciting. I gave a talk to the Produce Council about thinking outside of the box. And I think what's happening is, first of all, the consumer is much smarter today.
Absolutely.
And not only is the consumer smarter, retailers and wholesalers and manufacturers are all smarter. You have fabulous artisanal, quote-unquote, cheeses coming from the Northwest. You have them from California. You have them from, of course, from Wisconsin, which is the biggest mass producer of cheese. But the point I want to say is if it's just because it says artisanal, doesn't mean it's great.
Doesn't mean anything.
No.
Right.
No. And you could go to some place like Rogue Creamery, which started out as an artisanal cheesemaker, was taken over, but they still have the hands-on process. So what's happening is you're getting communities supporting these people as well, and you're getting importers and exporters also supporting the artisanal or small grower. I think what's happening is the customer is suddenly saying, I want taste. We know that statistically, I think the consumption of cheese is about on a par where it's been, but there's a huge growth in better cheeses. Used to be, and still is, of course, cheddar and mozzarella and probably Parmesan, because in food service they reign supreme.
Right.
But look, now you have a pizza and it has a fabulous blue cheese on it. You have absolutely customers saying, oh, I really want Wensleydale from England, but I don't want to buy a whole wedge, a whole piece. So supermarkets and specialty food stores are also cutting up and packaging them, which is important because most cheeses you don't want to have sitting around for a long time. They degrade.
Right.
The other thing is...
especially in the kind of refrigerators that most of us have at home.
Well, yes. I mean, I think this is really true. But I think that, the iGens, these people are really interested in tasting new stuff. They go to a chic restaurant. I mean, certainly the millennials do. They go to a chic restaurant and there's a cheese connoisseur. And look, we have special, really good education about cheese professionals. that are trained. So the guy that started out in the deli, that's fine, but he has a potential of a career.
Right.
Which I think is really interesting. And you have better transportation today. You have e-tail. All of this is bringing this to a point where people want cheese, not just, look, for somebody who wrote a book about bacon and macaroni and all that stuff, but the macaroni may have very special cheese in it, and very special bacon too. But,
so tell me about Cheese Connoisseur.
So Cheese Connoisseur to me is a great joy because it allows me to create recipes. My strength, I think, or one of my strengths, is I invent recipes or I modify recipes. So I'm getting people to think outside of the box. So here I did a smoked trout and smoked Gouda quiche, and which was delicious. Or going over here.
And you didn't bring any for me to taste.
My dear, you are always invited to my house. Or I'll bring it to California.
Okay.
This one's rather amazing. This is a broccoli, cheddar cheese, and bacon quiche.
Here, in fact, let me hold it up.
Go ahead.
So that people can actually see this. Can you see the pictures here of this? And this is the magazine. It's
Right.
Cheese Connoisseur. Okay.
So these are sort of stepping up. Smoked trout is readily available these days.
And smoked Gouda.
And smoked Gouda. This is broccoli, cheddar cheese, and bacon, and I used not only the bacon fat, but cheddar cheese in the crust, which made it, we all know that our great-grandmothers probably put lard in their crust, and they were very crunchy.
Well, there's still restaurants, even in California, that still use lard to make French fries, and they're the best tasting French fries ever.
Well, let's do a bacon fat, duck fat, and a bake-off, and we'll waddle outside.
Yeah.
So that was fine. And then, Phil, here's the funny story. I got to a point, I said, well, why aren't there any sweet...
Here, let's hold this one up too. And maybe if we can actually even zoom in on that. So we can see how beautiful that is. Okay.
So the idea was, let's really think outside of the box. And there really haven't been a lot of sweet quiches. What did I find out? Well, fruit leaches a lot of liquid.
Makes sense.
Yes, and I was going to do it with mascarpone. I thought that would be wonderful. I started out with fresh cherries. It didn't work. It turned pink. It wasn't pretty, and I was really depressed. I did 5 versions, only because once I start on a project, I really... And what I found out is I deconstructed the quiche, and I made like a zabaione with an orange liqueur. I folded in the mascarpone, and I folded in dried cherries. And I put it into a chocolate crust. What I heard is people really loved it.
And why shouldn't they? And this is great. So all the recipes are in Cheese Connoisseur.
Correct.
And that's available online as well as in newsstands.
Right.
And thanks so much for being
it's
here.
Always a pleasure to see you. Absolutely.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back right here on SFA News Live. You can watch us on YouTube Live. You can watch us on Facebook Live. And also all these segments, all these interviews will be housed permanently on Specialty Food Association's website. So stay with us. A lot more coming up.